What will they say at your funeral?
Me, individually?
He's rich, but he was a dick.
If you reflect back on your happiest memory from the last 5 years, what's the first thing which comes to you?
I guess probably like...
Now I get to be the architect of my own life.
I got a little bit shivers listening to that story, to be honest. I got the chills a little bit. All right, boys and girls, Poker Spirit fans out there. I am joined today by Rupert Gibson. Rupert is a poker mindset coach, and he is the poker mindset coach with the best social media in the game. If you look at his reels, they are pretty spectacular. They make me feel like a technology boomer, and I've been very impressed with his social media game as of late. He is also a trusted friend and someone who I personally go to for advice when I need help with my mindset or some perspective on a situation. So someone I respect and admire and trust very deeply. Rupert, meet the people.
Thank you very much. Very kind words. Yeah, we do our best.
Good to hear. So, as I said, your social media has been spectacular. You told me your inbox has been full for the last couple of months, ever since the video's been going out. You've been working with Poker Spirit players for a long time, so I know that your schedule is very busy. Tell me, what problems are out there in the poker world right now? Like, what are the mindset issues that guys are having?
I generally think of this in sort of two different tiers or two different levels. I think most people come into poker mindset coaching with the primary objective of how do I win more? And usually the problems which are facing out and are very obvious are quite what I would call sort of external. So perhaps that might be not getting enough volume in, or not getting on top of people's schedule, or having bad habits or poor routines, or maybe emotional regulation at the tables. And that typically is where a coaching relationship will begin, with those kinds of problems. And as things develop, typically there's some kind of underlying beliefs or values or feelings about themselves or life generally, which is sort of niggling under the surface and creating that dynamic where those unhelpful behaviors manifest in people's day-to-day lives. So I sort of think of those as two different tiers of mindset work in the poker space.
Okay, so if I understood you correctly, we've got the surface problems and then like the underlying problems, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Good way of putting it, yeah.
And surface problems is like not enough volume, losing, angry, kind of obvious, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the more common, like without calling anybody out, what are some of the more common underlying problems that poker players struggle with that they might not even know that they struggle with?
So quite specific to poker players, I think there's quite often people choose poker it's usually a certain kind of person that chooses poker. And as a result, there's typically been some kind of desire to break away from, let's call it the mainstream way of living life, which is why people have chosen poker. And consequently, it can be quite common. Maybe common's a bit too much, but it's not too unsurprising when people come into poker mindset with either a dynamic of self-doubt or fear of failure, or kind of an anxiety, which maybe they're not super aware of, but is carrying over into their day-to-day actions and behaviors.
Interesting. So, I mean, being a poker player is kind of like being an entrepreneur. You're gambling on yourself. You're betting on your ability to make it. So it makes a lot of sense to me that there would be this underlying fear of, well, what if I don't? You know, what if I go broke? What if I can't support my family? What if I got to go get a job and I haven't had anything on my resume in 15 years? There's always these sort of fears that people working at a bank don't have until the day they get laid off, and then they go, oh crap, you know?
Absolutely.
So what do you think about the, like you talked about the personality, the kind of person that wants to be a poker player? Something that I remember I encountered a lot of is a lot of people who want to be poker players. It's like they want to march to the beat of their own drum. They want to do things their own way. So then when there are certain ways of doing things that are maybe GTO, maybe preferred, like, I don't know, going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, there's a lot of resistance among poker players to like doing things the correct way because it's such a like, I can succeed doing it my way kind of career. So when you get a client, and clearly the best thing for them would be to get a little bit more organized, get a little bit more structure, how do you make this fun for them? Because I find that poker players abhor doing the things that they really need to do to succeed.
I think the way that I encourage people to view their career is to view their poker career like a business, and to think of themselves as the CEO of that business. They are the asset which generates EV, which goes on to generate money. And when you're seeing yourself as a business, all of these little steps, like small things like going to bed on time, to eating well, to exercising, to meditating before you play, they're all investments in yourself. And I think what I like to draw attention to is, if you're putting a ton of time and attention into getting good quality volume in, or studying to increase your EV, but then you're smoking weed until 3 a.m. and then falling asleep and getting up after 6 hours, then so much of that hard work that you put in is being detracted by the small things which lead up to your eventual performance at the poker tables. So in terms of like, how do we make that fun? I think there's a few different ways that you can approach it. You can kind of gamify that process by having some level of accountability with people around you, either people in your poker network or a stable if you're part of one, or working with a coach. Having sort of streak counters, I think, can create a lot of satisfaction. So perhaps that means tracking your achievements, tracking your schedule. I'm a huge fan of goal setting in poker, and not just goal setting. Something I say regularly is, there's no trophies in poker. And unless you win a bracelet or something of that cut, you're probably not getting some kind of recognition for your achievements. So if nobody else is going to do that for you, then you kind of have to do it for yourself. There's no pay rise at the end of the month. And by creating milestones for yourself and actually acknowledging and celebrating those milestones. So maybe that looks like meditating every day for a month, and at the end of that month, you go out for dinner with your friends, something like that. You create this positive feedback loop in which your reward is being matched not only by positive expectation at the poker tables, but also you're creating positive experiences for yourself as a result of your hard work and dedication.
You said so many things there that I feel that I could respond to it. My brain is like, which way do I go? Really awesome answer. So I think the idea of creating rewards for yourself in poker is super important. I think a lot of the types of people that get into poker, in my experience, is people are really driven, you know? And when you're really driven, you tend to be tough, which is good. But if you're kind of your pride is being stubborn and working really hard and outworking the competition, it's very easy to forget rewards. It feels like we just have punishment, which is a really bad feedback loop where either we're perfect or we failed, and it doesn't feel good. We're basically feeling bad all the time because we're never perfect. And I think it's very unnatural for high performance types of people to stack these little wins. But if you can do it, it's super helpful. So you talked about, like, you know, having a streak for, say, meditation, and maybe you hit 30 days, you go out for dinner, you know, take a trip with your girlfriend or something like this. Little things like that, these little milestones you can create for yourself, you can still have the punishment, but at least you're not, you know, now you're playing good cop, bad cop with yourself instead of only bad cop, if that makes sense. I have found in my own life, for example, that the drive away from pain is stronger than the drive toward pleasure. So, you know, when I wanted to have a meditation streak, I do $500 last longer with, I think it was with you actually, or at least you were the beneficiary. So then, you know, meditated every day for 3 months. It worked out well because I don't want to lose $500. And if I can continue not to lose that money by sitting down for 20 minutes, I'm very likely to do it. When you have everything, though, in your life is do this or XYZ punishment, even if the punishment is just feeling bad, that's kind of a recipe for burnout, because you look at your life and there's nowhere you get a win. I get a win what? When I'm the best poker player in the world, I'm better than everyone else who's ever lived. Because that's, to be honest, not probably going to happen for me. So I better have some rewards along the path, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And, I reminds me of a conversation I was having literally just yesterday with a client of mine, a very successful player, has been a full-time professional his entire adult life, is an EPT winner, but has been on a bit of a rough stretch recently. And we were talking about just how he felt about himself and about the last year, which he's had, and he's kind of been on a fairly drawn out downswing. And we kind of acknowledged at the end of the conversation that he'd been doing all the right things. Like his process was really spot on. But he found in himself that despite that, he didn't feel good about himself, even though he was doing all the right things, which wasn't yet translating into results, but the process was there. But that wasn't converting into positive affirmation. So we talked about that. And we talked about the way that he was reflecting on his time. And he noted that at the end of each day, he does like a little journaling exercise. And he thinks about, what could I have done better today? Or what did I do wrong? Or where could I improve? But he was never at any point asking the question, what did I do well? He was only ever touching on, where could I improve? And that, I think, is well intended. On the other side, there is kind of... If you're never looking at what's going right and you're only ever looking at what's improving, then you're spending your entire life effectively living in a future, which is never spending any time in your present set of experiences and your present set of circumstances, where a lot of the time you're going to be doing loads and loads of things right, but you don't see the result of all those little tiny actions of positive action until later down the line. So I think it was really valuable to take the time to acknowledge those wins.
Behavioral science is pretty clear on this, right? Rewards are a big part of habit formation. So if I look at Rocco, if I want him to sit, Rocco's my dog for anyone who somehow doesn't know that, talk about him any chance I get. But if I want Rocco to sit and I just punish him every time he does anything other than sit, it's not going to be that effective. But if I give him a treat when he sits, he's going to learn very fast. And we like to think that we are so different, but we are creatures of habit. And if we do the right activities and we get a reward for them, even if the reward is just emitting some positive feeling, then we're going to keep doing that. So when I reflect, my journal questions are always kind of three things. What did I do well? What did I learn? And what can I improve for next time? And by putting them in that conscious order, like first I want to acknowledge what I did well, because that's the stuff that it also like, it creates a more open relationship with myself where I'm like, okay, I did some things well. And I'm like kind of respecting myself for that. And then I'm like, okay, well, what did I learn? And probably in where I learned, there was some mistakes, which is okay. And then the intention, the improvement, what do I want to improve upon for next time? And I find that very helpful. You know, I learned that from one of my first mentors. And up until that point in my life, probably up until I was 28 years old, I didn't have that question either. It was just like, what's wrong? What do I need to fix? And it feels more efficient, but it's not. Because if you don't reward the behaviors that are good, you're likely to sort of substitute new behaviors and constantly be dropping one variable to try to change another one, which is a inefficient way to run an experiment, where ideally we want to continue and uphold and improve the things that we're doing that are already working well, and then tweak those one or two other variables. That's how we get closer to a GTO solution for our life, so to speak.
100%. It sort of makes me reflect on the algorithms, which are so powerful in both social media and also in gambling, is that sort of intermittent random reward dynamic, where those infrequent rewards create that such a positive feedback loop that you're driven to continue. So by working with your own chemistry, your own neurology, by creating moments of acknowledgement and rewards, you're adding to your own discipline and motivation.
Also a more fun way to live.
Oh, for sure.
If you think about it, you know, if you live a life with no rewards, I mean, that's a pretty shitty life, no?
Mm-hmm. You know, if you're spending a tremendous amount of your lifetime building towards being a better version of you, which is commendable, but if you're never enjoying it, what's it even for?
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, it's about loving the process, right?
That's
like
it.
Alan Watts said, You got to do the work and realize that it's play. I think a lot of guys, when they're on a downswing, they're taking poker like way too seriously. But I get it. I mean, how can you not take it seriously when you're not making money and you need money to live in this world? So I do get it. I think that when you look at a poker player is doing well, they tend to be curious about the game and enjoying themselves. And it's a little bit tough because how do you tell someone who's been on a prolonged downswing, hey, you got to have more fun? But they do need to find their curiosity about the game again, because if it generally your money comes in when you're approaching poker in a curious way. You know, you play and you want to learn. Every day is like a puzzle. And I want to see what parts of the puzzle I'm solving better than yesterday and what parts I still need to work on. And the moment you trade that puzzle solving mentality for like, I sit down to make my hourly rate, I think it's going to start trending in a negative direction. That's at least the trend that I've observed.
It becomes a job. I mean, as soon as poker is just sitting down for an hourly, it's not that different from working in a company.
Might as well be a bot. One of the things that I think helps for players with rewards is being in a community. So, you know, in Poker Spirit, for example, it's a lot easier for a guy to set a goal and get a reward by completing it. Because if he says in the community in his blog, I'm going to meditate every day for 30 days, or I'm going to do a cool down after every session this month, then he gets to check off every week, you know, 7 of 7 done. And at the end of the month, be like, I killed it, 30 of 30. And people will put all the emojis and all the reactions, which, believe it or not, matter to us. You know, it's validation in our own social network. And I find that if you don't have a team, then you at least need somebody, whether it's a coach, an accountability partner, a study partner, but someone whose opinion matters to you. Because if, you know, you can't really have an accountability partner who doesn't care if you have better habits, you know, a lot of people, misery loves company. So you got to have somebody who's in the same mindset of self-improvement to be your sort of person that you want to impress, you know, or person that you don't want to disappoint, I think.
100%. I was actually writing a post about this literally this morning. This kind of lone wolf mentality, which is very pervasive in the poker space, and I think it's a real detriment to one's growth and success. One person working towards greatness is always going to lose against 4 people working together as a team. And again, coming back to this idea of how do you make the journey more fun, that's probably the number way to do it, is to have people around you that are on that same journey. Not only will you progress more quickly, you'll enjoy it a lot more whilst you're doing it. Your network really is your net worth. I think that is so pivotal in many aspects of life, and it's particularly true in poker.
And poker's an information game. So if you're relying on yourself to know all the information, it's kind of silly. There's just no way that you're going to compute and keep aware of more than a group of people. You might even be the smartest person in the group, but as soon as there's 2 people, 3 people, you know, they can all do different work and share the conclusions with each other. They can all play in different games and share about which ones are good. Like, you're just not going to know the space as well as people who collaborate. And to be honest, it's really dumb to try to do everything on your own. And whatever you've accomplished on your own, it's like, all you know is it would have been more if you worked together with some people. Granted, it might be better to be on your own than work with the wrong people, but working with the right people is unsurpassable. Like there's no better fit for the poker player than finding their kind of poker family or their people to work with.
I think the way in which people get to that place of being a lone wolf, I think speaks to what we were initially talking about in terms of the kind of demographic, the kind of person which ends up leaning into poker is usually people that didn't enjoy being in the normal societal path, going through school, going to university, getting an corporate job. So they take that mindset of, I need to be contrarian, I need to be something different. And then they hold on to it with their life in poker and struggle to effectively let other people in and allow themselves to be surrounded by other high value people. And I think ultimately that choice will slow down your progression.
Yeah, I mean, you said high value people, and I think it's an important like an important distinction, because I worked with a lot of poker players, and one of the first things they would tell me is like, oh, my poker friends are toxic.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, well, that's not good. You know, they're in some Skype group with like 5 other people, but none of those people care about mindset at all. They're all complaining about bad beats. Like if your friends complain to you about bad beats, you need new friends.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
like in every community I've ever had. I mean, one of our players, they flopped top set and lost with top boat to running quads in a $20,000 pot last week. I mean, they shared it in their blog, but it wasn't like a moan. I mean, guys were laughing. I mean, it sucks. Don't get me wrong. Like he lost a $20,000 pot to, running quads with top boat, but it is kind of funny. You know what I mean? Like the difference between tragedy and comedy is time. And there's a different way of sharing bad beats. Like you can share one like in a GIF and just put like a puke emoji, and it's kind of like you guys are laughing about it, and it's just, it's just what happened. But then there's like the kind of toxic bemoaning about my luck and this and that, and like, show me your 5 friends, and that's who you're going to be. So if your friends are not the kind of person you want to be, it sounds tough, but you might need new friends.
It's true. And I think when you come to that realization of, oh shit, I need better friends, that is quite a difficult moment, because just that sort of blank canvas of, oh, I'm going to have to find new friends, that's hard. And it's very easy to go back to the same conversation, to go back to the pub, or go back to being around people that sort of lead you down towards sort of bad habits. Like smoking weed's a really, really common one, where you're trying to break away from that and you end up coming back into that friendship circle and back into the maladaptive behaviors. And ultimately, especially as an adult, finding new friends is a commitment. It's a real sort of energetic endeavor. You need to actually be really proactive with it. And it's not always easy, but I think the benefits and the possible upside is huge. I encourage people to see it as an investment in their future selves, both in terms of their happiness and their fulfillment, but also their productivity and their EV.
I mean, other high value people are also busy and also probably don't have all the time in the world to make friends. So they also appreciate having good people in their circles. So generally, if there's someone that is the type of person you'd like to be more like or spend more time with, finding a way to give value to that person is a good way to, get the conversation going, or just, like it is very important to sort of recognize the impact that the people around you have on you. And just like you said, right? I mean, drug use is a very common one, right? Like if you're trying to quit alcohol and your friends drink and you're around them, it's going to be tough. If you're trying to, quit smoking weed and your friends all get high every weekend, it's going to be tough. But if you're trying to be really serious about your poker studies and your friends study 15 hours a week, that's they're sharing a server, they're using like the newest tools, that's going to have an effect on you. That's going to rub off on you in a positive way. So, it's also like you get to be your kind of best self when you're in a community of people that might be more receptive to that, and then they benefit from getting to be around you. So it's kind of a no-brainer, but I recognize that it is difficult. It's not automatic, and it can feel scary to try to like make new friends.
Something which I think a part which a lot of people struggle with is the idea of cutting these people off altogether, because maybe these are the people that you grew up with. And what I say is that you don't necessarily have to cut them out completely. That is and that can be the right option, especially if there's a pattern of toxic behavior. But you don't necessarily have to cut these people out altogether. You can still maintain a relationship with them, but perhaps you spend time with them in a different way. So rather than seeing them every weekend, you just see them on birthdays, or change the environment in which they see them. So alcohol is a really common one. Like if you've made the decision that you want to stop getting blasted on the weekends, but you still want to see those friends, then rather than seeing them in a bar on a Saturday night, make plans to meet them on the tennis court or the golf course on a Tuesday afternoon. Like realistically, you're not going to go out and get wasted on a Tuesday afternoon down at your local sports club. But if you're sat at a bar with your friends whilst they're drinking alcohol, odds are you're going to probably end up relapsing into behaviors which perhaps you've decided that you no longer want to engage in.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's a great compromise if you want to continue to hang out with certain people, to invite them for things that you do agree on doing, like, going to the gym together, like, whatever you guys can share that is helpful for both of you. But it's also, I think, a common, like, just reality of life that as you get older, your friend circle is going to shift to people who do the same things as you.
Yeah.
So if you stop drinking, you can hang out with your friends for a brunch on Sunday well, maybe they're hungover, so a brunch on Monday, I don't know. You can like keep it going for a while, but eventually if you get into other activities, like say you join a CrossFit, fast forward 2 years, you're going to be better friends with the people in the CrossFit. If you end up having kids, fast forward, you're probably going to be better friends with other couples and not as much friends with some of your single friends. Doesn't mean you're not friends, but it is just the way life kind of works. Is it makes sense to surround yourself with people who like to do the same things as you do. And relationships tend to become more distant when there aren't as many common interests. And there'll always be select people that it's worth it to continue the relationship and put effort into, despite, geographical distance or not having as many common interests. And that's unique to every person. But the people that you interact with most frequently, it's, in my estimation, probably for the best that you share a lot of common interests and that you share a lot of commonalities. I mean, obviously you want to have differences so that you can learn from one another, but also, imagine having no poker friends and trying to be a high level poker player. It's near impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. And the natural follow-up question, which I think comes when you get to this point in the conversation, is, well, how do I make these new high-level connections? Where are they hiding? And as we sort of previously talked about, it is a bit of a process. So the first and foremost, you've got to put yourself out there. So if you're, let's use that example of wanting to find more high-level poker friends. I think the question or maybe that's something else. Maybe it's more fitness friends or whatever, is to put yourself in the environments where those people are. So if we roll with the poker example, go to more live events where there's likely to be good professional poker players, like going to EPTs, for example, or look online. Like I remember when I was playing poker full time, my sort of during the peak of my MCT career, I had a group of 3 other professionals where we would study together after sessions, we would run sims together. But to get to that point where I had those guys was a real journey. I initially found a Discord group via Reddit, which was kind of like mostly low stakes players, was pretty toxic. From there, I got invited into another Discord server. From there, I got invited into like a sim running group. And from there, I met those 4 guys that ended up going on to be like really good study friends. And that was all a process, between step A and step E or whatever was probably 6 months or something, and you just got to kind of keep showing up. Like if you, in sort of like an IRL scenario, if you want to join a new community, maybe to want to join a CrossFit club or a climbing club or whatever, something in real life, the first few months which you turn up, you may not come away from that with newfound meaningful connections. But if you keep showing up week after week, eventually you start to connect with people, and eventually those acquaintances become real friends.
Yeah, I agree. I think as well, not every person who comes into your life needs to become your new best friend or like the person you're going to be walking with when you're 80 years old to have it be a valuable connection. I've found throughout my life, moving around a lot of times, or times in my life where I might be speaking to one person very frequently, and then maybe I'm traveling and I'm in a different part of the world. And now there's other people I'm speaking to quite frequently. And there's still value in those connections, even if you don't get the chance to keep them up all the time. Like you might join a CrossFit gym and make friends with a guy there the first couple of weeks. And that person might teach you some things about mobility or things about your deadlift, or you might help you in some way from his life experience and your life experience as a poker player. Understanding, and unique perspective on the world often rubs off on the people around you. And then maybe that person goes for a semester abroad, or they go travel, or somebody else joins the gym that you get along with better, and you get, that person becomes your like primary friend. It's not a bad thing. You know,
Mm.
it's very common that connections you make with one person lead to connections with other people, which it's just how you go through life. And I think the biggest crux of it all is being open for connections.
Yeah.
Like you said, putting yourself out there. As a poker player, your job only requires you to be behind a computer. So if you don't change something, either when you're out in the world or from behind the computer, you know, PMing people on Discord, if you don't do something to add a social element, you won't have one. And I
Mm.
mean, even just in a health sense, I mean, not having a social network is a higher predictor of early death than smoking cigarettes.
Yep.
And it's kind of crazy. So if you want to be happy, if you want to make more money, if you want to enjoy your life, it's like, got to make some friends. You know?
I agree. And I can imagine somebody listening to this who is maybe somewhat anxiously disposed and is also very driven. And to that kind of person, because I think there's a lot of people in the poker space which fit that caricature, is if the only thing in the world you're maximizing for is your EV, you still will benefit from going out and creating more connections. If you are just living at your computer, living in sort of poker, I think pretty much inevitably at some point you will start to burn out. And like a downswing will start to get to your heads. You'll stop putting in volume. It's very, very difficult to sustainably be in a high performance mindset if the only person you're ever interacting with is yourself and Pyre. And if making those connections feels hard, which I think it does for a lot of people, and honestly, it is hard. Like I think putting yourself into new communities in person, there is something quite intimidating about it. And it is a bit of a process. And if you're not naturally extroverted, I think for a lot of people, it feels pretty challenging. I would say two things. Is one, it's not just you that it feels challenging for. It feels challenging for probably most people in that room. Unless they're an established member of that community because they've been going to that class or that meetup or whatever it is for months. If you're a new person stepping into a new community, it does feel quite uncomfortable quite a lot of the time if you're not naturally disposed to that sort of environment. So one, it's okay that it feels hard. And two, just start small. Just kind of go to one class a week or to one meetup a week or to one language exchange or whatever it is. Just start small and kind of dip your toe in. And as you sort of progress, it will start to feel easier and easier as time progresses. And maybe you focus that specifically to a poker context if that feels easier. Maybe if you're an online player, go and flick in a live session at your local casino kind of on Fridays, if that feels kind of doable.
Yeah, I think live stops is one of the main reasons to go to live stops. Like, unless you're an absolute world beater who plays like super high rollers and stuff. I mean, if you're playing the 1K with the crappy structure and you have to pay for travel and accommodation, it is probably kind of meh in terms of EV. And if you have a strong win rate online, you're probably better off staying home. But the main reason to go to live stops is the experience. It's to go to dinner with friends, to make friends. And even if you only have like one good poker friend, maybe you're a little bit more shy, probably if you go to a trip with that person, they can introduce you to more people. I mean, it might seem like common sense, but it's not always just about EV. You know, it's about life EV and the non-obvious EV as well. Most people don't consider that you might meet someone and then you tell them like where you're at in your poker journey and you talk about poker, because poker players tend to talk about poker when they get together. And then who knows, maybe 6 weeks later, that person reached out to you and like, hey, aren't you playing this game or like this, you know, aren't you studying this? I met this guy the other day, so-and-so, he's a crusher in that game. Like, I think you should talk to him. That's like the number of times that has happened to me. Like, I can't even count that I met someone, didn't think anything of it, just like, oh, that was a cool person to meet. And then they reach out to me with some sort of opportunity, some sort of like thing they'd like my help with, or somebody they want me to meet. And, you know, my poker network has grown a lot just through, you know, just being myself and talking to people. You know what I mean?
That's it. Doors open doors.
It's also like, I mean, I look back to the time in my life when I was probably the biggest lone wolf and had the least social interaction. It was like 2012. I'm an OG. I was I was grinding Supernova Elite, which is a lot of volume, obviously. And I was living in a place I'd moved to recently, and it can take like up to 6 months to really put down connections. But even like the little things, like I would go to a similar restaurant pretty often, and I would order similar, like I would talk with the staff, and get to know the people making my sushi, or get to know the people at the coffee place or whatever. And just those little connections, like those familiar faces, it's interesting, but it adds value to your life. It may seem like, what's the point? But there's some innate human need to be like in a community. And it may feel like it's not important because it doesn't translate in your win rate, but just having those, being recognized by the person at the food market, it makes you feel like a sense of belonging. And it's kind of silly, but it really does make you feel happier. And like, an example for me, being in a country where I don't speak the native language, once I started learning enough to just speak with cab drivers, like, waiters and stuff, you realize you feel so much less isolated, even though you're not having any deep conversations, just because you can sort of talk with people, I think it's very easy to miss this as a poker player, to think what's in it for me, what's in it for my EP, and just, head down, intermittent fasting 24/7, headphones on, and just like tune out the world. And I think it's a big mistake.
Mm-hmm. For sure. It's it too easily becomes very isolated, and that's hard to sustain.
I would say that a lot of times when I work with people, at some point, the relationship topic comes up.
Mm-hmm.
For every poker player, they're either in an amazing relationship with the love of their life, they're in a relationship and then you might need they want to improve the relationship, or they haven't found that person yet and they would like to meet that person. And at some point, people usually feel comfortable to bring this up if they're not already fully satisfied with that area of their life. And the thing is, you're not going to find that person through poker, most likely. Yeah, I mean, there are some women in poker, of course, but it's maybe 10% or less of the population. So it's unlikely statistically that you're going to find your love of your life at the poker table. I know it does happen. So that being the case, you're going to need to speak to people, you're going to need to speak to people that it doesn't fall into your lap. It's not going to be your coworker. It's not going to be someone at the water cooler at the office. And when you get more comfortable speaking to people in general, the barista, the bus driver, the, other guys at the gym, at the CrossFit, at whatever, it just becomes more natural to speak to people. So then when you do encounter maybe a woman that you want to talk to, it's much easier because you're not practicing social isolation every day. You're practicing going out of your way to be friendly with strangers, because otherwise you're not going to meet anyone.
I like to, just to, sort of in the name of keeping things practical, or actionable, a good bit of advice, which I think is easy to implement, is to just in your day-to-day interactions, like you mentioned the person at the coffee shop or whatever, to just get in the habit of asking the framework, which I usually suggest, because I think it's attainable enough that it's doable, but it's challenging enough that it kind of pushes you, is to ask one very surface level question about the other person. I think if you engage other people, you get them to talk about them. Most people like to talk about themselves. So if you ask someone a question about themselves, they'll usually respond. And that can be something really, really easy, just like, how's your day going? And you can have default questions, which you just kind of have saved for when you're having these little interactions in your day-to-day life. So one simple question, and just get into the habit of asking the person that's making your coffee, oh, how's your day going? And then if you want to push it a little bit and be a bit more creative, follow that question up with some kind of open-ended remark, which doesn't necessarily require, so not something which is directly a question. So say you ask, hey, how's your day going? And then they make a comment, follow that up with some sort of statement which invites conversation but doesn't demand it. And that, I think, is a good balance of kind of getting you into a place where you're having to sort of think on your toes a little bit and create interaction with the people around you, but is also actionable enough that you can do it at any point kind of on the fly.
All right, give me an example. I'm a barista. You asked me how my day is going. I said shitty.
Oh, well, that's tough. Not many people are going to say that.
That's easy. It's a layup.
But is anyone does anyone do that? Does anyone respond by saying, "Oh yeah, my day's been terrible"? Maybe they do.
Much easier to have an interesting conversation if I say shitty than if I say fine.
Yeah,
True.
It's probably my natural intuition if someone said that would be, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. What's been going on?" Just kind of go straight in, and because I think if someone's offering shitty, they're probably kind of willing to chat a little bit.
Now you're going to be coaching a barista, and that's probably not ideal.
No, probably not what I signed up for. I just came in for a cappuccino, and I leave with a half-hour coaching conversation.
If my barista said that they were having a shitty day, I'd offer them to pet the dog. It invites conversation.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way. Oh, maybe I can make you feel better with my dog. I like that.
Just get a dog. It'll solve all your social problems. Just get a dog. Sure. Get a really cute dog. Take it to the park. You'll have all the kids you ever wanted.
It's kind of the ultimate social lubricant.
Yeah. I mean, dogs, they just don't care about all the shit we care about. They're like, did you see the sun's out? It's very happy today. Why you're not happy? Did you not see it's happy today? And like,
yeah, I'm very often envious of the dogs I see around me.
You've seen that picture, right? With a guy walking with the dog in the forest, and in the guy's head, there's like a thought bubble, and it's like all this stuff, like business work, blah, 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 bank, and then in the dog's head, it's like in the thought bubble is just him and the guy walking in the park.
Yeah.
It's like the same picture. It's very funny. Is that one of my most liked posts on Instagram? My crappy Instagram account with reels I made like a boomer. But yeah. I'm very curious how like these videos that you post in your reels, they look incredibly professional to me.
Thank you.
I mean, you're like, in one of them, you're in the shower, don't get any ideas, but like there's weird cuts. Like you're in bed with a sleeping mask on. Like it looks like it was like super professional. And I don't know, maybe I'm anxious and awkward, but I feel like I put in an exorbitant amount of effort into my reels or my content. And I don't think anything I made ever looked even remotely that professional. So I'm very curious, like, did you have somebody come in and like tell you where to sit and like, okay, we're going to shoot you from here? Like, or does your mind work that way that you're like, okay, I need to be filmed from this angle and now I'm going to be filmed over here? Like, how did it come to be? Because I find it very compelling. And you guys watching, go to @Rupert Gibson. There's Coach Rupert. What is that?
Coach _Rupert. Yeah.
Coach _Rupert. And yeah, check out these reels. They look very like, I don't know. They're like more professional than Hermosi's reels, and he's the G. So like, how is that happening?
So there's a few things there. The first of which is, thank you very much. Very kind. The first thing is that it's very much a skill. And I really did not appreciate how much of a skill it was until I started trying to work at it. I have a whole newfound respect for actors and models and stuff. Being in front of a camera is exhausting. I really did not recognize how much work actors are doing. It's because you're thinking about so many different things. But when I'm writing out the content itself, I do generally have in mind what I hope the like different transitions and what different shots could look like. But truth be told, I could only take so much of the credit. What is my writing is then getting put into an end product via a videographer who's really good at what he does, and then a really fantastic editor who is just very, very talented and really puts it all together. So I think it's kind of a combination of our efforts really ending in a product which I'm very happy with. So shout out to Matt, the editor.
Yeah, I don't see anyone else in the space doing videos like this. They're very creative. They're very they speak to the problems that poker players really deal with. And I've just been very impressed by them.
Thank you. Yeah, ultimately, I sort of am very, very excited to work with high achieving, very performance driven men. And I figure if those are the kinds of clients that I want to work with, then that needs to be kind of embodied through the work that I put out onto sort of my emails, my social media, etc.
I remember thinking the same thing. So I bought a $4,000 camera, which was at the time $1 So now my $36,000 camera is filming a podcast. So that was a wise choice. But it took me an awful long time to figure out how to use it. So
yeah,
it wasn't.
It's quite a bit of tech, those cameras. Hey,
I think making it fun is like something that really comes off, talking, because some of these things we have to talk about as a performance coach, right? We got to tell people to go to bed at the same time every day, and wake up at the same time, because otherwise you're just not taking the low hanging fruit, right? You got to wait 90 minutes in the morning or 60 minutes to have your caffeine, because otherwise your cortisol spike and your caffeine spike end at the same time and you're going to be tired. Like, these things are helpful, but they're not sexy. So how do we
No.
make it like fun to do the things you need to do? Like, maybe it's best for you to eat on a window and you eat every day from, noon to 8 p.m. and then you don't eat outside of that time. Like, how do you make things like circadian rhythm and intermittent fasting and doing a cool down then a warm up? Like, how do we make it fun? And that's one of the things I think in the social media, at least, you're kind of talking about some of these things, but you're making it seem inviting. You're making it seem fun, because we need to build a culture where doing the things that will help me improve my win rate is what I want to do, not my list of chores, not the thing I have to do. Oh, James told me I need to do this and I better, like, the mentality has to be like, oh, sweet, if I just do these things, I'm going to start winning more.
What comes to me, and this is maybe a little bit deeper than being fun, but I think it speaks to what you're talking about, because when you're in this place, it feels very rewarding, and rewarding and fun, I think, are quite similar in terms of their circuitry, in terms of how you experience them. And it's to have your why for playing poker, like your sense of purpose. If poker for you is exclusively about dollars, I think it's quite hard. I think it needs to be, the people that I see being the most successful over an extended period of time, so we're talking years and decades rather than weeks and months, are two things. One, they love the game. I think that's a really important thing. If you've got to really just love poker, earlier you talked about having curiosity around the game, sort of a sense of playfulness and just wanting to improve because you enjoyed the game. So I think that's really, really valuable. And in addition to that, they have a sense of, I'm doing this because, and that might be to have the liquidity to build a business, or to buy a house, or to invest in ideas or in people that you believe in. And very often it's to be able to support the people that you love, to be able to, something that I hear a lot is, I want to be able to buy my mum a house. I want to be able to buy my sister a car. It's to have a sense of, why am I doing this? And I think the best way to do that is to be building something which is bigger than yourself, bigger than putting dollars in your bank account. And to kind of loop back around to this idea of fun. Sorry, I realize I've gone on a bit of a tangent there.
No, it's fine.
To make it, how does that make it fun? Maybe not fun in the way that playing video games is fun, but it makes it feel connected. It makes you feel aligned. And that, I think, is very exciting. When you feel like you're taking steps towards something which feels meaningful to you, even if that's not translating immediately into results, the fact that you're on the path, that feels very, very alive. It feels very exciting.
Yeah. It's like being in alignment with a vision. It gives you a sense of purpose. And when you have purpose, you can do things that aren't fun, because I have a purpose. And nothing feels better than to be living my purpose, to be waking up and feeling that sense of progress.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, we are sort of like the animal in the experiment. And when we feel that our growth is happening, when we feel we are getting closer to our goals, that we're improving and we can see that improvement, that's a very affirming feeling. Whereas, say we're playing a video game or something, and it's stimulating in the moment, but we know that time spent playing that game instead of studying is making us feel further from our goals. Maybe we go to bed a little bit later, we sleep a little bit worse, we don't put in the work we could have put in and gone to bed on time because we're, playing some game. We feel that we're going in the wrong direction, and that doesn't feel very good. So it's sort of like not focusing on the delayed gratification, but focusing on the instant gratification. It's like anything, like porn, like junk food, it leaves you feeling worse. And when you get into a mentality, a habit, a way of being, of liking to do the things that give you the long-term rewards, that's when life starts to sync up and things start to work, because now you're doing the behaviors that you ought to do. Doing those behaviors is feeling good because you know the rewards it brings. and then those rewards actually start to pile up and come in.
The framework, which I love because it's so easy to remember, it's sort of rolls off the tongue, is easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, easy life. If you do all of those instant gratification things like smoking weed, eating junk food, playing video games in indulgence, life becomes just so hard, it's so hard to sort of have that sense of fulfillment, that sense of progress, to make steps forward. But if you make the hard choices, which don't necessarily feel gratifying in the moments, like waking up on time, cold showers, eating healthily, everything becomes just so much easier. And one of the most valuable mindsets for anyone in entrepreneurialism or in poker, which are really just different versions of the same thing, is delayed gratification. And the more that you can lean into that, something which Alex Hormozy talks about, this idea of thinking in hundreds. Stop thinking in what can I do today? What can I do in 100 days? Or rather than what can I do in one hand? What can I do in hundreds of hands? And this thinking, like scaling up the way that you think about life, scaling up the way that you think about progression. Stop thinking in weeks, thinking in years. And there's a balance in that, because you don't want to spend your entire life projecting into the future. You do also want to be able to have some of your day-to-day consciousness in the present. But in terms of how you are viewing your progress as a professional and as a person, to scale it up to a longer term picture.
It's interesting. Alex Hormozy, he had a contrarian social media post recently, we'll say, where he's basically saying that like success doesn't care if you're a shitty person. He's like, success, it's about the work. You got to do the work. So success doesn't care if you watch porn, if you, cheat on your girlfriend. Like success doesn't care. Success just cares if you did the work. It doesn't really care if you're a virtuous person. And, it's kind of an interesting take, because I think it is essentially true that there's a certain amount of work that it takes to be a success. And a lot of times I find with poker players that you've got to find a way to do the work, whether it's by wanting to do it, whether it's being driven enough to do it. You got to have some way that's going to get you to do what's required to get the results that you want. Mm. And if you can make it fun, if you can make it awesome, great. If you can do it by being super proud of yourself for keeping good habits and working through it, great. If you're super driven and feel terrible if you don't work hard, I don't know if it's great, but like it's better than not doing the work if your goal is to be a successful poker player.
Mm-hmm. And to speak to Mr. Hormozy, who I really like his work. I think most people in sort of performance circles do. This idea of success doesn't care if you're effectively if you act kindly, if you're a good person, in literal terms, that's probably true. And there's a lot of things which Alex says where if the only thing you're streamlining for is professional success, then that's probably true. But that's not the complete picture. Professional success is one part of a greater whole, and that whole really is happiness and fulfillment. And I think being a person that you're proud of come the end of your life is a big part of that picture. And probably if you are really cutthroat to get to the top and you are unkind to the people around you as you're on your way up, I think you're less likely to feel good about that. You're less likely to feel that sort of sense of happiness and fulfillment.
Unless you're a sociopath.
And, like statistically speaking, within like really ultra high performing circles, like if you look at like the social science behind CEOs, there is a disproportionately high number of sociopaths. That's sort of those
dark triad.
The dark triad, yeah, that's it. So I'm gonna sort of narcissism, Machiavelli. I can never say that word. Machiavellism and psychopathy. Those three traits are unusually high in people that go on to be CEOs, because there is that sort of like thirst to be at the top. And I think the question that's kind of worth
that study though. was like, I don't know if they distinguish between CEO of what kind of a company, you
That's
know?
true. Yeah.
Is being CEO of a bank and being CEO of like SpaceX is pretty different.
Hmm. It's true.
But
And
yeah, I
actually,
mean,
I'm not familiar enough with the study to really comment too acutely. What I think is tangible for the everyday listener is to ask yourself, when all is said and done, what kind of man do you want to have said you were?
what will they say at your funeral?
Me, individually?
He's rich, but he was a dick.
Well, I really, really hope not. Well, for me as an individual, I would like people to have thought that I was loving in everything that I did.
There's an exercise in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People where it tells you to take out a piece of paper and to draw, like, in one corner your significant other, another corner your best friend, and another corner like a family member, another corner like a community member, like somebody at your gym, and then write like what you would want each of those people to say about you at your funeral. And
Mm.
it's called like living with the end in mind. And once you do it, it's sort of like a map for how do you want to live. So
Mm.
if you want your wife to say you were always there for her and that shared a lot of great fun experiences, but in reality you're stressed all the time and snapping at her when she talks to you. If you want your mom to say, my son checked in on me every week, but really you haven't talked in months, so on and so forth. It kind of shows you, am I being that person? Am I being that person that I want to be?
Mm.
And the
Great
reason I bring up
exercise.
the thing, yeah, it's very good. The thing about Hermosi and like saying that you can, do all these things that may not be part of a great life, so to speak, a fulfilling life, and saying that like success doesn't care. Part of the reason I bring that up is because I think that it's important people to know they do have a choice, right? Like you don't have to go to sleep on time because like someone's telling you have to, and you don't have to like quit smoking weed because somebody else says it's bad for you. You can smoke weed if you want. You'll just have the effects of someone who smokes weed. And those effects aren't conducive to, high performance. So if you want to be the best poker player you can be, using marijuana more than occasionally is not going to help you. And, similarly, like if you want to have a fulfilling relationship, like you can watch porn if you want, but it's not going to help you have a more connected, empathetic, loving connection with your partner, very likely. So it's not like you're not allowed to do these things that make you a bad person or anything. It's just like everything has a cost. Just like alcohol has a hangover, surges of dopamine from pornography has a hangover. What else? Like all these things, like staying up too late and then waking up and not having slept enough, it has a lasting effect. It has a hangover on your performance. So all of these things, junk food, like you can eat fast food all you want, but it has an effect. And it's up to you, what margins do you want to find? But a lot of people, it's like you said at the top of the call, they're putting in all this work in the solver, so to speak, to get from 99 to 99.5% in a spot. But then they haven't optimized the low hanging fruit of sleeping well, eating well, this kind of basic stuff that's common sense but not common practice.
Mm. To speak more directly to managing the relationship we have with behaviors which might not be GTO, like junk food, like alcohol. Peter Attia, Dr. Peter Attia did a podcast with Tim Ferriss, which was just a very long form podcast about kind of health generally, like optimized health. And they did a piece about that was on alcohol specifically. And the way that he talked about it, I thought made a lot of sense, because I think if you say to most people, okay, so here's the deal, you should never drink. For most people, that's just going to be like, oh, never? It's kind of a bit, it feels a bit intimidating. And the way that he thinks about it, so this guy, for reference, is a very accomplished doctor who has just written this very, very comprehensive book on, I think it's called, what's the title of the book? I think it's Medicine 2.0, which is basically about preventative care, is looking after your body preventively so that you don't have to be in these situations where you have diseases which can potentially be very sort of serious to your health. And he talks really openly that there's certain alcohols which he absolutely loves. I think the three he mentioned was really good wine, really nice tequila, and dark Belgian beer. And this is someone who's taking their health incredibly seriously and is doing all these tests and optimizing his diet and got the glucose monitor and everything, And the way that he thinks about it is that he will only engage with, using alcohol as the example, drinking these alcohols on if it's really, really going to be worth it, if it's a particularly special occasion, and he's going to wake up the next day and he's probably not going to have slept as well, but he's going to have had a great time with his friends. He's going to have had a really positive experience, because ultimately life is for living. And there's a very big difference between going out for a celebratory dinner and having a nice glass of wine and having that sort of add to your experience versus finishing your session and knocking off a couple of beers and a doobie 5 days a week. And I think one is the way that I like to think of this, not only with alcohol, but with all behaviors, is it conscious? Like, are you making a conscious choice to engage in this behavior? Like, are you consciously choosing to have a glass of wine or to go through social media, or is it default conditioned behavior? Are you picking up your phone by just because you always have? You pick up your phone to answer a text, and then half an hour later you're still scrolling through reels and you're like, how the fuck did that happen? Or are you smoking weed compulsively because you need to get to sleep? If those things are happening as a result of conditioned behavior, then that's a problem, most likely. But if you're consciously choosing to go, okay, it's my best friend's birthday, we're going to go out for dinner, I'm going to have a glass or two of wine, and probably I won't sleep so great, but that's okay because, life's for living and this is a conscious choice. That to me is healthy, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I agree. I think the kind of the adage of going to the fridge and, cracking open a beer at the end of your day. I mean, who does this? Generally people who aren't satisfied with their life, 5 p.m. Thank God. You chose poker, you chose a thing you love, you chose a lifestyle you love. And maybe part of that freedom is you can go out and get shit-faced on a Tuesday if your friends are going out for somebody's birthday, and fine, have at it, have fun. You can still be a high performance person and have fun. But if you're drinking every Tuesday just because it's Tuesday, because, my session ended and I didn't win today and I'm a tournament player and I lose, 60, 70% of my sessions, that's probably not a great strategy. Go to a music festival once. It'll be once a year. It'll be a lot more fun than, drinking every Wednesday and Thursday. You know what I mean?
And I kind of want to speak to that more directly. And because I imagine there's quite a lot of potential listeners out there where this does sound a lot like what's going on for them in their current life situation. And I know that because before I started taking mindset work and before I ultimately became a mindset coach, I was that person. That is exactly how I was ending my poker sessions, was with weed and alcohol, 4 a.m, whatever. And not to excess, but without fail, pretty much after I finished playing poker, I would have a beer or two and I would smoke weed. And it's weird to reflect on. It's like a different version of me, like a past version of who I am, like a ghost of my past self. But that was the reality. And at that time, I had a lot of work that I needed to do on myself. And there were a lot of things about me and about the way that I related to life, which I wasn't very happy with. And to get from there to free of those behaviors, it took a lot of work. And I guess the reason I'm drawing attention to that is if you are engaging in these kind of numbing strategies, whether it be porn or social media abuse or smoking weed or alcohol or whatever it is, maybe it's because you're kind of maxing out your dopamine centers too hard. But there is also probably a significant possibility that a part of you is not very happy, just at a base level. And if that sounds familiar, then I strongly suggest that you work with that and work to do the work to change that. Work with a therapist, work with a coach, start reading personal development books, because chances are you can keep running, but it will keep following you.
Interesting. I think a lot of people don't recognize that you can be happier and you don't need something external to work on that. Like, you don't need to have, like, say you're making 40K a year right now. You don't need to get to 100K a year to be happier. And in fact, like, yes, it'll help, of course. And like, you should get to 100K, it'd be a good idea. But that's not the thing, even if you think it's the thing. And many people who get to 100K or get to 200K, whatever their next milestone was, they're like, oh shit, it didn't do it. So I guess I need 1 million. Now I need 5 million. Now I need 10 million. Like, the keys to enjoy your life as it's happening, they're in you, as cliche as it sounds. And many people run their whole life without finding them. People don't know what gratitude is. People think gratitude is like, oh, a journal or some bullshit. Gratitude is appreciating life. You look at a tree and you feel a 6 or a 7 out of 10 awe that life is cool. Whereas someone who's ungrateful looks at a tree and just sees, oh, a fucking tree, who cares? They're living at a 2. It's like there's a dial of how much you feel life in a positive way. And if your dial's at a 2, your bank account's not going to change that, because your absorption of reality, your filters are the problem. It's your perspective. And changing a perspective, it happens from books, it happens from coaching, it can happen from therapy, happen from travel, from epiphany, from it's not a thing you can, I mean, you can buy the travel, you can buy the trips, you can buy the coaching, but ultimately it's information and experience that will change your appreciation of life. And those are things you can work on today. And they're things that you should work on every day, because otherwise, what are we here for?
So yeah, money is a means to obtain wealth, not the wealth itself.
Lets you go on cool trips. You can go to the jungle and do ayahuasca if you want. You can go to a retreat, a breathwork retreat. You can do all the cool things. You can go to Tomorrowland. You can do all the things. But it's like the things are the things that change you. The experiences that you have, that the people that you meet. These are the things that matter at the end of the day. And your finances will always be a limiting factor unless you become so wealthy you can do anything you want. But no matter how poor your finances are, books are really cheap. Books are like $8. You know what I mean? So if you haven't read some of the classics, like, that can change your perspective and help you be a happier person, well, you could do that tomorrow. You could do that. Like, you could download it on Audible. You can watch it for free on YouTube, probably. The information's there. You just need to make a conscious choice to change, make a conscious choice to start feeding your mind better stuff, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. What this kind of conversation reminds me of is I remember listening to Elliot's podcast way back in the day, and I can't remember the guy's name. I think he was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu champion, I think, and who also had some sort of affiliation to poker. And he talked about how he put 100% of his life to becoming I said Brazilian jiu-jitsu champion, world champion. And he put absolutely every little inch of himself into making that happen. And then he won the title, and he was happy for one day. And then that was it. Like, he hadn't found happiness in the result. And that's kind of like another example of that sort of 100K in your bank, or that $1 million in your bank, that can help facilitate happiness. But the money itself won't create happiness. It's a tool, as a utensil to create experiences, make memories, facilitate growth and learning and relationships. Those are the things which will translate into happiness.
Happiness is a way that you go through life. It's a disposition. You can be a prick on a yacht. You know what I mean? You can be miserable. You can go to a sky bar in a beautiful city and be like, this waiter took too long to bring my drink, or like, they didn't pour it enough, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you can complain anywhere, or you can appreciate anywhere, and I think it's like, it's just like such an important thing to be cognizant of, that like, we filter the world through our consciousness. And if your filters are, like a dimmer switch, if they're all the way down, it doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter like how much money you have. It doesn't matter. Like, you can be miserable in a fancy restaurant, in a fancy car, you can be happy in a park with a tree, you know what I mean? With a blanket that feels soft, you can be happy with a nice pillow. You can be happy with simple things. There's this quote: if you can't appreciate a coffee, you won't enjoy a Ferrari either. I thought that was very very profound.
If you're just like on the moment, if you reflect back on your happiest memory from the last 5 years, what's the first thing which comes to you?
Me? I guess probably like meeting Julia.
Yeah,
my wife.
like actually when you met her? That's kind of like the initial memory.
Yeah, I mean, it was a rave, so it was a pretty sweet time.
Cool.
I don't know if most people meet their wife at a rave in Brazil, but I do recommend it.
Nice. Yeah, good example.
What about you?
Yeah, I asked the question, obviously expecting that you were going to answer me. I actually have no idea straight off the bat. Let's see what comes up when I think about it. Actually, probably the first thing which comes to mind is I went into an Airbnb with two friends to do a sort of psychedelic experience, which was for personal progression and sort of, let's call it spiritual development, not sort of recreation. Mm-hmm. And just sort of the feeling of connectivity to them and to sort of the nature around me, sort of the afterglow of that was pretty special.
How expensive was that?
How expensive? Not expensive. A train to the countryside and then a not very expensive Airbnb, split 3 ways, probably a couple $100.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, I guess like the flight to Brazil was actually, I think somebody bought it for me, so it was free.
Oh, there we go.
One of my clients to Brazil, which was quite appreciated. But yeah, I mean, the tickets for the show is like $100 or something. I mean, most of the most enjoyable things in life, it's very cliche, but they don't cost that much, you know.
Yep,
I adopted my dog, you know. No one's given me more joy than him, and you know, his food cost is pretty low. Don't get me wrong, like it's sweet to be comfortable and be able to do things, but it's not the thing that's like making you unhappy, you know. And it's if you're not happy, I think there's no point to wait to try to make it better, to try to improve it, you know. You'll perform better if you're happier. You'll be able to find the energy to do the work that's required if you're happier. You'll take the losses less personally and be less likely to burn out. You can still be driven. You know, you can be very happy and very driven because, as you talked about, you can be on your purpose. You can know what you're striving for, and you can enjoy the striving because you know that you're doing the right thing. It's a very affirming thing to be in the right path, you know? And very often it can be hard to set a path for yourself. I mean, I've worked with many coaches, and one of the things that I really enjoy about the coaching relationship is it's like working together with somebody else and kind of outlining a path with someone. And it makes it more real than if you just pick up a notebook and try to do it with yourself. You sit with somebody else and you make like a plan. What am I going to change in my life? What's my life going to be about? How am I going to do, whether it's for your health, whether it's for poker, whether it's for your mindset, you kind of make a plan for your life. And then as you follow that plan that you laid out with somebody else, you feel good. You know, you feel this sense of progress. And as you start to change things about yourself that maybe have been a certain way for a long time, you start to become unmistakably aware that there's other things about my life that I can change. And it's not about necessarily changing everything, but it's that idea of possibility. Like where life seemed stagnant before, where life seemed like it was going to be the way it was the day before tomorrow, now it feels like it can change. And once we start to feel that life is malleable and that we can improve things, well, now our dimmer switch has gone from a 2 to at least a 6. You know, we start to have a smile more often. We start to bad beats roll off the back a little bit easier. You know, we're smiling at the barista, wondering if she's single. You know, like life is starting to feel good because now we believe in possibility. We believe in our ability to create favorable outcomes for ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think when you're the person making that progression in yourself, in your own life, there's something just so exciting about that place where all of a sudden the lights get a bit brighter and the possibilities seem kind of endless. And when you're sort of very much connected to this sense of progression and being on your path, it's a very exciting place to be in. And as a coach, it's great fun being a part of that. I really enjoy. That's probably my favorite thing about the job is helping people facilitate that transition and seeing it happen and sort of sharing in that experience. Like just this morning, I had a call with a guy who has been smoking weed and has been very reliant on it his entire life. And, you know, he's been smoking since he was like 13 or something. We sort of sat down and we had this call and we really determined that, you know, the cannabis just had to go. It just wasn't facilitating him. And on the call together, we literally flushed the weed down the toilet. And it was such a beautiful moment. And he came and I asked him how he felt after and he really was initially very, very apprehensive, very anxious about letting go of it, because it was like the question he kept coming back to is, what am I going to do? And when we sort of kind of talked through it and really identified that it wasn't, the reliance on the substance wasn't aligning with the life that he wanted to build, feeling into that fear of what do I do without this thing that I've been so reliant on, was that it was okay. It was okay to have that fear, but to feel the fear and do it anyway. And when we kind of got rid of it and it was gone down the toilet, and I asked him, so how do you feel? And he was just so excited. He was like, just really like radiating excitement for what came next. He kind of pushed through the fear and into like, okay, now I get to be the architect of my own life.
I get a little bit shivers listening to that story, to be honest. I got the chills a little bit. It reminds me of being in a live event, like, and seeing people have breakthroughs. Because when you go to a live event, like a live coaching event, people have very different problems that they come in with. So you might have one person who's, getting over the death of a loved one. You have somebody else who's got a substance problem. Like, they have very different problems, but they all, through similar kind of reframing techniques and addressing the underlying beliefs and the wounds, they get to a similar place of being the architect, feeling that they can shape their own life from this moment forward. And that is sort of an attitude of happiness. And that is an attitude of gratitude. It's like you suddenly appreciate the joy, the gift to be alive, because I get to make this thing, I get to make this life for myself. And it's a much different experience than thinking life is this thing that happens to you, where it's like, you're not being dragged behind the car, you're driving, and it's a really cool moment. I find that a lot of people, I think what holds them back, and I'm curious what you think, but I think what holds people back from getting coaching, getting the help they need, is having to admit to somebody the problems they might be ashamed of. Having to tell somebody like how bad it is, like, how often they're using what we'll call non-ideal coping strategies. People who want to quit porn, people who want to quit weed, people who want to drink less alcohol, they feel embarrassed that they're having problems with these things and they're not already in like what they might consider a socially acceptable way. They're not proud about their habits with some of these things. So even just to tell a coach, like, I'm not where I want to be with this stuff, for some people can be difficult. And I think what's important to recognize there is that people need coping strategies. People have a problem, they have to find a way to solve it. And if you're young and you start having, like your client said, started smoking weed at 13, I don't know what was going on in that person's life when they were 13, but some way that they were processing their environment led them to feeling that they needed something. And that was the thing that they tried, and it worked. And it's very similar, I think, for a lot of people with porn, with social media, with these other things. It's like there's some feeling they get and they don't know how better to deal with it. So they figured out this way and it's working for them. So when we start to take out these habits, it's very important to both get curious about the trigger feeling, like what is causing me to turn toward this thing, and to have like a list of what you can do instead. So one of the exercises I like to do is take a notebook, like this one, and just map out one side of the paper, the things like the triggers, the feeling, on the one side, the undesirable behavior, and on the other side, the desirable behavior. So we have like three columns, basically. The thing I'm doing, I want to stop, the thing that causes me to do that thing, and what I could do when that thing happens instead of the thing I want to stop doing. And this is super effective. And as soon as you do this exercise, now it's like you're a ninja. You're in the moment. You're like, oh, had a bad session, going to the fridge, open the doors, see the beer. It's that moment. And I'm like, all right, why don't I try going for a walk outside? If I get home from the walk and I still want to have a beer, I will. But let me just go try that first. You know what I mean?
Great
and
advice.
These little changes, you need to break up the routine about the behaviors. So this person, there's probably like a specific place where they used to get high. There's a whole ritual to it. And now it's like, if they sit in that same chair, it's going to feel empty. So my suggestion would be to, be somewhere else, do something, mix it up. You know what I mean?
One of my favorite quotes of all time from Viktor Frankl, the author of Man's Search for Meaning, is in between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our power and our freedom. And to sort of paraphrase that, when something happens, a stimulus, we respond to that stimulus in some way. And typically, those two, stimulus and response, are very close together. And there's a little space. And in that space, we can choose how we want to behave, and we can choose more adaptive behavior, which aligns with the life that we want to live. And the more that you choose new behaviors, the bigger that space gets, and it gets easier and easier and easier to choose better, make better choices. And to use your example of going to the fridge and grabbing the beer, maybe initially that space is very, very small, and your window of time is very limited to make a better choice. But the more that you do it, and the more that you engage in mindfulness practices like meditation, the bigger that space gets, and the easier it becomes to really reflect and go, what is it I actually want to do? Not what do I want to do by default. What does the best version of me, what does my highest self want to do?
I feel like your logo in the background here for people watching on YouTube is sort of like an illustration of this space and how it can change over time.
Well, very good. That was kind of the imagery we were going for. Yeah, it was progression
Nice.
there. Yeah,
it resonates a lot with me. I mean, I think many habits that I had that I wanted to change about myself. It's like in the beginning, it was like felt impossible. You know, it felt like I needed to be perfect. I need to exactly pinpoint the moment that I'm going to do the thing I don't want to do anymore. And like really have like an intervention with myself to change my behavior. And then like as you become more conscious of it and not more conscious of it, as you increase the awareness around this behavior, the triggers and the alternative things you can do instead, now it starts to feel like almost easy, you know, like eventually. And you're like, yeah, that urge again. I can't believe I used to do XYZ whenever this happened. Now I'm going to do something else, you know? And yeah, it's like, it's amazing how different it can be. And that's the thing I think people don't understand. Like the same person who, you know, every day is reaching for a beer at 5 o'clock or every morning is waking up with a joint, they can look back maybe 4, 5, 6 years down the track and just be like, holy shit, I can't believe that was me.
Yeah. No, 100%. You know? No, I think that what you're describing there is so true and so powerful. And I can say that with a strong sense of conviction, because that's the relationship I have with my past self. I look back at who I was and the relationship I had with and it's unimaginable. It doesn't even really feel like I'm thinking about myself. It just, the idea of repeating that behavior is so alien. And actually on the very rare occasions that I've in between stopping smoking weed and having tried it again, just like in a social setting, I was immediately like, this is awful. Like, why did I do this every day for years? And that's not to say that cannabis has no application ever, but the idea of consuming that on a daily basis just felt so weird, and it still does. So I guess the reason that I wanted to highlight that is if you're listening to this and you have a relationship with something, and whether that be porn or weed or booze or whatever it is, and the idea of being free of that thing feels impossible, like, don't worry, that's how it's meant to feel from where you're sitting now.
Yeah.
But when you free yourself of that thing, it's night and day. It's a completely different life, and a time will come where you'll look back on that and go, fuck me, I can't believe that's who I was.
Yeah, speechless. It's just like, it is exactly like that. Many things, you know, if you've been overweight your whole life, you know, if you become someone who gets into shape, you'll look back and be like, wow, it's crazy. I used to be very out of shape, you know, but if you've never done it before, if you can't remember a time that you've been in shape, it feels impossible, and everything feels impossible until it's done. If you've been an addict to something for so long, it feels like you'll be an addict forever. But when you're not an addict anymore, you're like, my God. I think one of the, you know, not everyone who, like almost everyone has a habit that's really standing in the way of their potential, but not everyone's is as obvious as, say, like, you know, weed or whatever. I think for a lot of people, it's going to be social media.
Yeah, for sure.
I think most people are spending more than an hour a day on their phone.
I did a group coaching presentation recently on social media and its impact. And during that exercise, I got everyone to get out their phone. And if you're listening at home, I suggest you do this now. Get out your phone, go to settings. On Android, it's called digital well-being. It's slightly different on iOS. It's something similar. Like if you just type
Screen
in
time.
screen time or whatever, and look at how many times you're opening your phone each day, how many notifications you get, and how many hours a day you are spending on your phone. And in that call, and for most people, I think it's around like 4 hours a day or something chronic. Most people open their phone, I think the average is 58 times a day, that kind of opening their phone and unlocking it, which is bananas. And I think the question to ask yourself is, how much is that behavior giving to you, your present day happiness, and the future that you're wanting to build for yourself? And I'd follow that up by drawing attention to, so researchers have done studies on how long it takes to focus again and to regain concentration after a distraction. Have you ever sort of looked at this study? It's super interesting. How long do you think it takes to regain focus after a distraction?
Is this like the concept of residual attention from deep work?
Yeah.
Like
so say you're like in sort of deep concentration. Let's use a poker example. Say you're grinding, and then you get a notification, and then you quickly open whatever Instagram to respond to a message, and then you come back to your session. How much time do you think it takes to come back into full concentration?
Right, like it drips. So you might get like, you leave 15% behind, exactly. And then some minutes later you've got 10% behind. But to get all of it back, I don't know, maybe an hour.
Yeah, well, it's not quite that bad, but to get back to full concentration is 23 minutes. So if you're opening your phone and you answer your message and then you come back to your poker session, it takes 23 minutes before you're fully back in the zone on average. And it's like, how much EV are you dropping during that time? I don't know, but it's probably enough that it's worth thinking about.
I mean, if you're a tournament player and you check your phone on 5-minute break, you should just take your phone right now and break it on the floor, because it'll
exactly. It'll probably be cheaper.
I mean, yeah, it's absolutely insane. And you only need to do it once and get like a stressful message, and then you're like, my God, why did I do this? You know, if you've ever opened your phone on a 5-minute break while you're on the toilet and got like some stressful message, and then you're got to go back to playing poker, it is nuts. So, yeah, I would say, I think the average person listening to this, their screen time per day is probably between 2 and 3 hours. And I would think that with 10 to 15 hours available a week, Monday through Friday, if they could reclaim that time, I would imagine most people could make an additional $50K a year minimum. And I think a lot of people listening could probably make an extra couple $100K with 15 hours a week. I mean, it's a lot of money. You know, it's a lot of time to be wasting on Instagram, on social media, on Twitter. Not to mention the way that it's not just the time. Like if you spend 2 hours a day on Twitter, it's not just that you waste 2 hours a day, but it's the way that it shapes that filter that you see the world through. You know, seeing all this like kind of nonsense that's going on in the world and thinking about that, and, you know, dreaming about that and having thoughts about that while you're out to lunch or you're doing other things. It's not just the time it directly steals, but it's all that time where your attention hasn't come fully back to the present moment, which the more and more time you're going back to social media, it's like pulling a scab off and keep reopening the wound, you know, the wound of being scatterbrained and not focusing on the things that are important to you.
Absolutely. So, I sort of like to keep things actionable. What I would suggest to anyone listening, you know, there's loads of different strategies for managing your relationship to your phone. The place I always suggest people to start is to turn off notifications.
Yeah.
Or like all notifications. There is, apart from maybe your bank, that there is no reason to have notifications on in nearly any scenario. And when I have this conversation with people, what I generally get back is, oh, but what if there's an emergency? To which I would say, when was the last time that happened? To which the answer is nearly always never. And then my follow-up question is, but okay, you don't want to be negligent. You want to be available for those that need you, like your friends, family. If there was an emergency, how would they contact you?
Yeah.
And they'd phone you. They'd give you a call. Nobody WhatsApps your mum's in hospital. they phone you.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, you can be disciplined, and yes, you can use willpower to not be constantly getting pulled into your phone. But you could also just make it a lot easier for yourself. Turn the notifications off and make phone usage conscious. Make it a choice to actively sit down and go through your messages. Maybe do that. Make that like do it after you have lunch, for example. Kind of assign it to a certain point in your day. Go through your messages. Or if you want to use your phone, like say you want to spend some time just fucking around on Instagram, I don't think that in and of itself is necessarily a problem. If you make the choice, you're like, okay, I've got 20 minutes free time before my bus or whatever it is. I'm going to look at a few dog memes or whatever it is. I don't think that's the end of the world at all. What I think is a problem is that your phone is buzzing every couple of minutes, or even if it's only every half an hour or whatever, and you are being pulled into the app. Like, your attention has a dollar value, which is worth money to app developers. And if the technology is pulling you onto your phone, onto the app, then how much autonomy do you really have over your attention, over your choices? Flip the script. You be the one to choose to engage with these technologies, with these platforms, rather than the technologies choosing to obtain your attention.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I don't insult our listeners when I say this, but to be honest, if I'm around somebody and their phone like dings, I kind of assume they're like not a high performance person. We'll put it that way. That's putting it kind of nicely. Like I definitely, like, when I'm around people and they have notifications on, I kind of think less about their intellect, honestly, and like their ability to get things done, because for me, it's so fundamental to being like, to accomplishing anything is valuing your attention. And if you get an interruption from some silly app, it's like you don't respect yourself. You know what I mean? Like, you're giving your attention, like all these companies, of course, they want to be able to grab your attention at any time. They want to have a notification like, hey, yes, do you consent to like banners and lock screen notifications and all this stuff? Like, hell no. Like I pay $10 extra a month for YouTube just to block out all the comments and all the ads. I'm this kind of person, like I pay for Spotify because I don't want to hear the advertisement between two songs. It's like, don't let people take your attention. You have to protect it. It's your life. It's the resource that you have. So, with the phone, I think the most basic things, as Rupert mentioned, it's turn off all notifications and then don't use it right before bed or first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
It's fine. I grab my phone first thing in the morning, put on the meditation timer, but not open Instagram. And if you can't help break the habit of opening Instagram, then, maybe don't use the phone at all for the first 30 minutes until that habit is broken.
Yeah, I think that framework of turn notifications off, don't use your phone in the first and last 30 to 60 minutes of the day. That's kind of the 80-20 of managing phone addiction or social media addiction or maybe addiction is a strong word, overusage. Like if you can implement that, you're doing most of the work and regaining your attention.
When I think about doing a podcast, it's one of the reasons I find it preferable to Instagram, is because I prefer, like, as a listener, I learn more from a podcast than I'm going to learn from Instagram stories, because when I listen to somebody on Instagram, maybe they're saying something really clever, but they're competing with the dog memes. They're competing with the hot girls. They're competing with all the different things that like can activate different parts of your brain and pull you in different directions. So I find that it can be somewhat easier, I think, to have deep conversations and convey deep meaning through books, through audio, through this type of thing. And that's why I find it so admirable, the ability that you've had to jump into the kind of the attention arena with like really nice looking videos and actually play the game and grab people's attention and talk to them about things that matter, while still sort of maintaining your own intention and attention boundaries, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, man. And yeah, and honestly, because in terms of producing valuable content, realistically, it's tricky to get much across in a 40-second reel. So for anyone that's interested in developing their mindset further, I'd really encourage you to sort of reach out and look for more long form resources like podcasts like this one, like my email list, for example, or for books or kind of other sort of more engaging long form content, because that's where the real value is.
If you like Hermosi, you get the book, you buy his book. If you like a coach, you get their course, you get their coaching, like these are the ways that you're going to learn, not just kind of following the menu and kind of like hearing the 40-second tidbit next to everyone else's 40-second tidbit. So
that's it.
So speaking of which, if guys listening to the podcast, if they want to reach out, if they want to do a call with you, they want to learn more about how you can help them, what should they do?
Yep. So they can head to either my Instagram, which is coach_Ruperts, or you can go to my website, which is rupert-gibson.com.
So _ for Instagram, hyphen for www, right?
That's the one.
All right. We're going to put that in the show notes. So whether you're on Spotify or YouTube, there'll be links for you. You can also just DM us on Poker Spirit on Instagram and ask for Rupert, and we'll make sure he gets the message. Either way is good. And I guess for a closing question, I always like to ask people, Rupert, if this was your last chance to address the people, what advice would you want to give them? If you were going to be beaming off into outer space to go live on Mars, and this was your last parting shot with humanity to give them some information that might impact their life, maybe 3 things, maybe 1 thing if it's big. But what do you want to tell the people? Like, if this is your last chance to talk to the audience, what has made the difference in your life, or do you think would make the difference for them?
Oh, that's a big question. I'm going to have to take a second to reflect on that.
Sum up your whole life in 2 sentences.
Yeah, right. I think I would encourage people to really lean into recognizing that you are the asset. Like, you invest in yourself through your actions, through your behaviors, for where you put your money. Like, the ROI on investing in your own progression as a person is probably going to be higher than the ROI you get on investing in Bitcoin. And if you've got cash left over at the end of that, sure, buy crypto also. But ultimately, your life experience, the time that you have on this earth, is going to be governed by the way that you experience your day-to-day life. And the more that you can elevate the top of that life experience through not only progression, but through creating memorable, happy, loving experiences, the better your time on this earth will be. And that, I think, is where the real joy is to be had.
All right, folks, invest in yourself. Rupert says it. Hermosi says it. I agree with it. It's the best investment you can make, because you're stuck with you until you're not stuck with you anymore. And that's even worse. So make it a good thing, right?
Right on.
All right. Thank you very much for the time today, Rupert. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Poker Spirit podcast. All right, guys. Take care.